You want to dive into the stories and myths behind Professor Scienza's new series, but Italian isn't your thing. No problem. You find all the conversation translated in English in the new Mama Jumbo Shrimp book, an Italian wine pilgrimage with Professor Attilio Scienza. Now available in English on Amazon.
Welcome to this special Clubhouse session of the Italian Wine Podcast. Listen in as members of the Italian wine community engage in fascinating conversations about contemporary wine topics. If you enjoyed the show, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. And remember to subscribe and rate the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your pods.
Hi everyone, this is Beatrice welcoming you to the Italian Wine Clubhouse Ambassadors Corner, one of the top-ranked shows on Italian Wine Podcast. Here, our ambassadors get the mic to interview their favorite producers with total freedom. And if you miss it live, no worries. It's all recorded and dropped later on the Italian Wine Podcast. Today's guest host is Lisa Lazzaretto. Lisa is a Switzerland-based entrepreneur, wine professional, and marketing strategist. Today, she's gonna interview Pasi Ketolainen, Master of Wine. So, Lisa, Pasi, how you doing, guys?
Very good, thank you. Thank you, Bea. And you?
I'm fine, thank you. And you, Pasi?
I am very well as well. The spring finally arrived to Finland as well, so we've been having a beautiful sunny days.
Oh, that's amazing. I hope to have said your surname rightly. So, Ketolainen, isn't it?
That is very correct.
Oh, thank you so much. So, Lisa, are you ready for our ritual question?
Yes.
Perfect. So, how did you meet Pasi?
In Germany at Mundus Vini competition, where we both were judging wines.
That's amazing. I want to hear your conversation, so let's jump in. Lisa, now I'm turning over the floor to you. Have a nice interview, guys.
Thank you, Bea. So, Pasi, it's very nice to talk to you again. Last time I saw you in Italy, right? So I guess 3-4 weeks ago. And so here we are. I would like to start not with a technical question, but with a personal one. When people see these letters, in MW after your name, they immediately imagine authority. Sometimes they are often even intimidated a bit, right? But before all of that, who were you as a young wine professional? What kind of wine first made you curious? And why did wine actually make you curious?
That's fascinating questions, Lisa. Sorry, English is not my native language, so I might occasionally need a little bit more time for thinking, but I'll do my best in English and let's move forward. So the wine actually woke up my interest mainly because of the combination of the whole story. So it's the combination of place, people, time, not just a taste of wine. I actually were in my youth first interested for beers because of some of my older friends. So that's where everything started. But then my teacher from the restaurant school actually put me to the wine competition of the Nordic students regarding Alsace wines from France. And as a competitive person with a sports background, I decided that I'm not going to this competition to lose and actually happened to win it. So that kind of started my career. And I had just started in an Italian restaurant the same week. And the manager asked me, so you seem to know about wine. Would you like to be our sommelier? At that stage, late 90s, I wasn't even familiar what sommelier is, but I said, yeah, why not? And I took the position pretty serious because I won the best wine list competition in Finland only the year after. And that's kind of the way how I hooked up. You also asked me about my first kind of fascinating wine experiences. My father used to have a letter friend from Germany, and therefore I remember as much as I remember for the childhood that we often had Riesling wines at home. And I kind of find them pretty fascinating, interesting labels, funky taste, and so on. But then a kind of one single experience which I can remember turning me much more curious for wines was actually a Bulgarian red wine from, if I remember right, from the Bordeaux blend. So that kind of made me think about it. Wow, this is completely different what I have tasted before. Why is it that then? I'm still on that way, a very curious learner and far away from having a full knowledge of anything. So I stay humble.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Fascinating experience, I think. So you started basically with the beer and then moved to wine and then won also the competition. Well, that sounds very interesting. And as you mentioned, you started actually as a sommelier. And then also, as I know from your career description, you moved into sales and product management for wine importers in Finland. And then even you moved also into commercial and strategic roles. How did the sommelier side of you influence the business side of you? I mean, my question is also related then. Sometimes when I meet people, like we sit on the same table, right? There is a sommelier judging, for example, at the wine competition, and then there is the commercial buyer and so on. And sometimes I think that they almost exist in different realities. They are very different as personalities. So this is why I actually was curious to know the answer of this question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's why we hook up also so well. I consider you a very positive person, very, very sunny, very kind of curious. And that's what I like to think myself as well. So in general, I always try to find out the optimistic, positive side on everything. And maybe the sommelier background kind of walks with me together hand in hand with my background also studying for philosophy for some time. So I always kind of try to think about alternatives, that what else could there be. But during the product management and my commercial strategic roles, I always try to focus on charming with authenticity. So kind of always ask the producers and partners to define kind of clear differentiation points, something which the customers of the restaurants or the clients of the retail could also easily learn and remember to tell their friends when they are somehow hooked up. So kind of not so much focus on technical details. I think people will learn them afterwards if they first get interested on certain product. And I sometimes call a little bit black humor, but I call the people speaking about the different soil types as a terrorists, because I think it often is something which goes really by. It is a special language which many consumers feel that they don't get involved. So I think the wine talk should be more inclusive. It should be more dialogue than broadcasting the message. And maybe that's something which is kind of a reason of my earlier sommelier career. But I also want to kind of producers to show their passion, share their favorites, cherish the local legends and appreciations, and not to hide their own weaknesses. Nobody is perfect, so I think it's only making them much more approachable if they also show that they do have some human weaknesses. Maybe that's a bit of a long answer for your question.
Thank you very much. So you're always curious to know what makes this or another producer different from others, right? This is a very nice approach. When you look at a wine today, do you first think as a taster, as a buyer, as an educator, or as a strategist? I mean, you can be all of them. You have all these parts. Which voice is the loudest in your head?
I would probably start with the strategist in that sense. One of my favorite books, which I recommend for everyone to read within industry or outside, is actually Simon Sinek's Why Start with Why. And I think this question, understanding why something has been done, to understand the purpose of the winemaker, I think is crucial. Then it's easy to approach to kind of second question is how, which I think is kind of a little bit commercial thinking, how to sell the wine and how to involve it in very early stage. So that's probably the commercial side. But then also I think it's quite important to think from the consumer point of view. So what am I getting with this wine and what has possibly been the intention of the winemaker? I was very lucky in very early stage of my wine career when I was in exchange in Germany, late 90s. I visited a local cooperative with the local premium producer and told them the wines were not so special. And he told me that, hey, remember, there is no bad wine. No winemaker never intends to make a bad wine. Some of them are more skillful, some of them do harder work, but it's always a question of the right condition and situation. And then he referred to a 3-week adventure in a Vietnamese jungle where after he came to the pool and got the glass of Thailand rosé and it was a perfect glass for that moment, even though maybe quality-wise not so special. One of the things actually which I also forgot to mention the earlier question about how the sommelier background sees is a high dedication for food and wine matching. So while I was early stage of my studies in Masters of Wine, many people ask me that, hey, why are you considering what would you match with this wine? But that's something which I think often relates to the situation. Wine and food go hand in hand in most cases. And I think that's quite a crucial part of the professionalism.
Wine and food, well, these are the topics which can make my following question sound even more natural, let's say, because of course I have to ask you, we are on Italian Wine Podcast, and I have to ask you, when you think of Italy as a wine country, what is the first emotion or image that comes to your mind? Okay, except of food.
Yeah, the food is in quite a crucial role. I think anywhere I've been in the world, the Italian food and lifestyle is always considered something social, fun, something which people want to connect with. So that, of course, is something important. But as I already told you in Vinitaly when we met, I'm completely amazed about the diversity, and you could even call it as an oversupply of options. So all those hundreds of indigenous varieties, the regions, the stories, the history, how it's related. I think with Italy, you just never get ready. More often I go to Italy, more I feel that less I know. And still, I'm very, very curious to discover more. I've been recently actually been quite often in Italy. So in Italy, in addition to that, Grandilange, several other projects in the country. But I've been finding fascinating things. The Piemonte whites or the Barbera's potential. Barbera, absolutely one of my favorite red grape varieties. The bubbles in Vinitaly were one of my key things to discover. Fantastic things. A little bit communication challenges on that side. But then you go to regional whites from Campania, the Lugana, Friuli. I completely fell in love to Carcante of Sicily. I think Sardinia is fascinating. This list could go forever. I don't think we have enough days to continue only on this list, so let's go. But one important thing which I also detected, I checked the Italian export figures from the last 15 years, and it's actually quite good to see how healthy the trade has changed, especially the boom of Prosecco, but also the other sparkling wines have significantly reduced the role of red wines, which of course are famous when we go to Brunellos or Barolos or other full-bodied reds of the southern Italy. So I think it's a diversity with one word.
Yes, thank you very much. And yeah, if you're interested to know more about Italy, I would also advise you to do the Italian Wine Ambassador program, which is amazing. And yeah, I think we can give you later some information about it. It's really about science and history and native grape varieties of Italy. Very interesting.
That's very fascinating. Actually, the restaurant where I won the best wine list of competition in Finland among almost 200 restaurants, that was fully Italian list. And even though it's almost 30 years now, I'm still completely fall in love with the country. I think the country and the wines and the whole history, there's so much more fascinating things to discover.
You mentioned some communication challenges. I was curious, just in case we have time for later, then could you explain later which communication challenges were these from your point of view with bubbles? I think you mentioned this. But now I just come to my next question. It's always about Italy. So as you mentioned, it can be incredibly complex. So many regions, grapes, appellations. And from the perspective of an international buyer and professional, what do you think? Is this complexity and this diversity, is it Italy's greatest strength, or is it also greatest communication challenge? Maybe it is what you meant before, or yeah, how do you think about this?
Correct. You read me perfectly right. I find it's actually not the complexity itself that's a challenge. I think it's more how it's translated into an inclusive dialogue, motivating the consumers to know more about Italian wines. It's clear that the message is having hundreds of details if you go for whole Italy. So therefore, I think it needs to be simplified. But I think in general, I also have a background for coaching junior football for almost 15 years. And I understood way too late that you actually proceed better with the questions instead of telling for juniors what they should do. And I think this also works pretty well with the consumers. As an industry, we need to encourage the consumers for dialogue, and they might be sometimes a bit afraid of that. I feel one of the major challenges is how do we get the people who don't have a privilege of born with the wine excited of the wine, while those generations born with the wine are probably consuming a bit less. But I think the Italian system in general is actually quite the precise rules help the understanding of the differences from the professional point of view. And I also believe the strong development of Italian tourism. I also checked the tourism figures and noticed that within the past 15 years, Italy has actually grown to a global benchmark for cultural, gastronomic, wine and lifestyle tourism, where people are getting more and more outside of the iconic cities like Rome, Florence, and Venice to the rural countryside. And I think that's a great way of creating ambassadors for Italian food and wine, let's say, hedonistic cultures. And I think that will be a helpful thing, but we just need to be able to communicate with all the different language of the people arriving and kind of making them ambassadors who are spreading the word of the Italian wines. I think that probably is a solution for how to get the complicated and multidimensional Italian wine culture more known globally.
So, do you think there's still too much technical information in communication? Should we reduce it? What is your ideal idea of the wine communication for such a complex and diverse country like Italy?
I think this is not so much of a country-related issue. I think Italy is pretty far with the wine tourism, or let's say that you are maybe more progressed than some other neighbors. But in general, I think the industry itself, I always been calling, I think, first of all, I think it's a little bit too polite. It sits on the fence without deciding to go either sides. I think we need to dare to take the risk that somebody may not like of our communication. So we need to dare to take more precise stand. And I think we also have to get out of the technical communication about the grain size of the soil, the different technical terms like malolactic fermentations or spontaneous fermentations. It's time to talk about those when the final consumers are already dedicated to certain wines and wine styles and are asking more questions. But I like to often compare when you go to the car shop buying a new car, you don't start discussion about in which country the bulk of the motors have been manufactured. You go to the point if the car is driving nicely, if the stereos are working, and so on. So I think that's something which we should learn. The cosmetic industry also, I think, is a good reference point for this kind of a dialogue type of communication, not only broadcasting our own message. I think that's probably something which would also make the Z generation to be more excited about wines. My own kids are 20 and 18, and they said that, Daddy, the wine talk is so complicated, and it's actually something we speak perfectly English, but we don't understand the words. So I think that's a very good learning curve, how to attract the younger consumers into the wines as well.
Yes, I agree. It's not always easy, though, to to forget all the old rules and to put yourself in kind of different communication style and models, because we from the wine industry sometimes when I listen to ourselves, to myself also, I think I sound sometimes very boring if I speak about wine, but
May I
yeah.
interrupt you there? I think you are far away from a bad communicator. Your enthusiasm, your passion, and your optimism actually comes true. That's why I think we also hooked up in the wine competition very early, and I think we had actually quite interesting conversation from many wine-related topics. So I think you should continue exactly on the road where you are. I think that's the way how getting people also more excited.
Thank you very much. Yeah, same for you. So let's go to my next question, and it's always about Italy. If you were advising Italian producers today, which regions or categories would you say have the biggest international opportunity? For sure, I'm also asking you more specific for Scandinavian markets, such as Finland, for example.
I would say it's quite a low global trend moving towards kind of fresher, more precise style of wines. I would say that's something which, particularly in Italy, I would consider discovering from Friuli area. I've been very fascinated about both of the islands, Sicily and Sardinia. Alto Adige is producing a beautiful wine, perhaps a little bit in the premium pricing. And then I would say the sparkling wines as well. The Prosecco boom seems to remain, I think, the major challenge for Prosecco, what we also spoke with the consortium of Conegliano Valdobbiadene, is how to get people pay more attention where the Glera grapes come from. Because I think you can still produce pretty good quality basic DOC Prosecco, but of course the difference is like day and night with some of the premium versions. So I would say that's probably the most interesting also for the Nordic markets. The Nordic cuisine has recently been, let's say, the last decade or even maybe a bit longer, quite popular in the world. So this kind of freshness, lighter style cooking is a great match with the modern Italian wines. And I actually even ask comments from some of the other Nordic friends. I actually have to correct a little bit. The term Finland is actually not part of Scandinavia, even though we like to consider ourselves. So that's why we wider speak Nordics. But the Swedish friends mentioned particularly Timo Rasso and Karikante and the Edna boom. From Norway, the feedback was for growing demand of entry-level Barbera. And in Norway and Sweden, where actually alternative packages, so back in boxes, Tetras, PET bottles, do have a massive role, over half of the retail sales. The private labels and the importance of the packaging, which I think is a strength of Italy, is also highly appreciated. But it's important to remember that the Nordic countries, all except Denmark, are actually retail monopolies, which of course sell the majority of the wine sold. So the on-trade role, HoReCa role, is often below 20%, even close to 10% in Finland. And therefore, these retail monopoly with quite strict rules for marketing are actually shaping quite much of the communication and especially the marketing points. So that can be sometimes complicated for the producers. Therefore, I think it's quite crucial for any producer from the world searching for a good distributor, a good importer who is active, not only fulfilling the monopoly tenders, but also actively works with the on-trade. Because I think in HoReCa is still a great opportunity to tell the stories and build a brand when the communication is correct and attracts the consumers.
Thank you very much. Sorry for putting Finland to the Scandinavian markets part. Yeah, you are also monopoly in markets. So for me, these are kind of Nordic monopoly, Nordic Scandinavian markets. But yeah, you're right. Of course, it's not the same. And what I wanted to ask you as well, is there any hidden gems? What do you think is something which is still not quite understood, but which can have really big potential in, like specifically in Finland, for example?
I was checking the latest figures. Italy is actually the category leader both in red wines and sparkling wines. And actually, it just passed Chile last year, which has been by far the number one country, at least from the early 2010s. So Italy is moving to nice direction. But I would say that the supply is still very, how would I say, polarized. I checked that Piemonte, Tuscany, and Veneto form over 70% of the supply. And if you add Puglia and Sicily, we are close to 90% of the supply. All the other regions are available, but in a very small role. And I think in the sparkling wines, Italy is actually catched up currently by the French Cremants, which are obviously taking the role due to the high rises of champagne. So that might cause little challenges in the future. The rosé wine in Finland is really a small phenomenon, less than 5% of the total consumption. But Italy actually had a very good jump last year for over 20% growth in that category. The white wine category is more diverse from Italy, but the market share is only 10%, and Italy is the number 3 from the countries. I personally believe that, especially in the HoReCa side, when I'm speaking with younger sommeliers, there is an interest and demand for this fresher, indigenous grape variety style. But I think it often seems to be a challenge that the distribution channels, so the importers, are kind of a bottleneck. Because it seems to be that pretty much all the importers have been reducing their portfolios since we had a small retail monopoly, how would you say, fracture. Because from the June 24, the supermarkets are allowed to sell wines until 8%. This, of course, is a bit of an artificial percentage because wines as such don't exist except in sweet wines. But it allowed kind of the big industry operators to use micro-osmosis machines and to reduce alcohol artificially from the wines to be able to supply this kind of wines. And that kind of fractured a bit of the market. The official figures not widely available yet, but it seems to be that they probably conquered about 20% market share. At least that's about what the retail monopoly has lost in volume. So that's an interesting phenomenon, and that was interesting to see. Often Sweden has been the Nordic country which has been first done the changes. So this time it was Finland, which was actually interesting to see.
Thank you for such a wide perspective. So yeah, rosé and white wine categories are still have very big potential. Many of our listeners and are wine students, as you know, of course. They are also sommelier ambassadors and maybe some wine producers as well. Of course, your title is kind of something which everyone who is working in the wine industry knows, and and a lot of people also dreaming of becoming of master of wine. So, what advice would you give to someone who is trying to attempt the study of master of wine, or he's thinking to start it?
I actually made a kind of a list of the things which I think the systematic mindset is something which is essential. For me, it's also already some years from my studies. So I passed the test already before 2010, and then my dissertation took a little bit more time because of the time pressure. But the key issue is kind of to maintain your curiosity, do the collaboration, and out of the box thinking instead of perfection, I would say. Resilience and patience certainly needed. You need to proceed inch by inch despite the struggles during the time, and those are provided during the studies, I can guarantee. Then also very important is an ability to connect the theory with reality so that you have practical examples. Those are crucial for your success and proceeding in the studies. And I would self-highlight the ability to conclude after paying attention for opposing views. So you need to be able to format a view. There to also lean strongly on your networks. Nobody is perfect, and I think any original idea isn't perfect. It always has room to improve. Then also taste broadly, but reflect very deeply and practice much on writing and communication. Just tasting is not enough. If you want to be a talented taster, I think the master sommelier path might be more interesting. So I kind of would like to conclude that it's less about how much you know, it's much more about how you communicate further your knowledge. That would be my advice for anybody dreaming to succeed in the MW program.
So, just to ask you my last question, what's next in terms of your wine career? You've been like everywhere, like we mentioned. Yes, sommelier, strategical background, MW. Which projects, regions, or questions are exciting you right now?
Well, in general, you discovered me as a very curious person who is always eager to understand more. I kind of have this kind of a childish excitement for all aspects of not only wine industry but many other things. But in general, I feel wine is kind of becoming more transparent. And as I already said, I think the industry needs to detect how to attract the segments who are not born with the privilege of wine. So I think that's one of the crucial things. Therefore, my projects I've been recently working are making wine fun again. So kind of increasing the inclusive dialogue between industry and consumers, which I already mentioned. And also, I think industry is full of uncertainty when we consider the nature, the climate change, and actually quite low in resources. I think that's something which we discussed with you earlier as well, that university top talents don't necessarily get into the wine industry, but the industry is full of passionate people who want to follow their passion. And I think that's something which need to be communicated. So I think there's plenty of room to work on there. If you're asking me what corners of the wine world currently interest me, I think the climate change impact not only on the viticulture and vinification, but also for identities of certain wines and classics. I was just last week in Mainzer Weinbörse in Germany, and I was asking many producers, how do you feel that climate change, is it going to make your classical Bernkasseler Doctor or Velenen Sonnenur, sorry for jumping out of Italy for a while, or it could be Barolo Canubi, will it change it to make something completely different? Also, how it impacts consumer trends. Then I also quite interested for discovering new regions in transition, like Eastern Europe, and support there for their export expansions. So that's interesting. Italy for sure has plenty of discoveries to be done. One lifetime is not enough, so I'm sure that I will be doing some Italian projects in the future as well.
Thank you very much, Pasi. I got to know you as a very curious, open-minded, positive, and knowledgeable person. So I wish you luck in all your beginners, like with the new projects, whatever you want to start doing now. And I think we can also slowly come back to Bea.
Thank you so much. If you want to add anything, Lisa or Pasi, be my guest. We have a little bit of time, but for me, it was already amazing.
I'm happy to thank Lisa for conducting the time schedule. The questions were very precise, and it was really easy to jump. This was actually my first ever podcast, so I was a bit nervous in the beginning, but I think in good hands of Lisa and Bea, I was just like home. Thank you very much for both of you.
Thank you, Pasi.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much as well. You were perfect, Pasi. I think you responded very clearly, very nice explanations, also very profound view on the markets and like wine industry. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you again, Lisa and Pasi. That was such a nice interview. And thank you so much, guys, for spending time with us. So to wrap things up, for those who are interested to participate, just send us a DM through our Instagram or mail our Italian Wine Podcast producers at info@italianwinepodcast.com. Thank you so much again, Lisa and Pasi, and thank you everyone for listening in. And this is a wrap from Italian Wine Podcast. Ciao, ciao!
Ciao, ciao a tutti!
Ciao tutti!
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, cin cin.